You don't rush a firefighter's promise. Jake Malone thought, his boots pounding the ash-strewn floor of a burning factory in Rockford, Illinois. Flames roared around him, a beast of heat and fury clawing at his turnout gear, but his heart was tethered to a small church 5 miles away, where Sarah Bennett waited in her white dress, her eyes searching the horizon. The radio crackled with his captain's urgent voice, but the desperate cries of a trapped worker held Jake fast. To the townsfolk of Rockford, it was just another fire, another call in a town that knew its heroes well. To Jake, it was a vow to save a life, to keep his word to the woman who was his home. What no one knew, not his crew, not the anxious crowd at the church, was that the real surprise was coming rolling in on the blaring sirens of 4 fire trucks, ready to transform a moment of doubt into a testament to honor, love, and the unbreakable bonds of a small-town firehouse. Before we dive into this heartfelt story, where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments. And if you believe that values like honor, courage, and sacrifice still matter, join us in keeping their legacy alive. The late summer sun hung low over Rockford, Illinois on August 24, 2025, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson. St. Mary's Church, a modest brick building with a white steeple, stood at the heart of the town, its stained glass windows glowing like embers in the fading light. Inside, the pews were filled with friends, neighbors, and family, their voices a soft hum of anticipation, mingling with the scent of lilies and polished oak. Sarah Bennett stood at the back of the church, her white dress shimmering, a bouquet of wildflowers, daisies, and black-eyed Susans clutched in her trembling hands. Her auburn hair was swept up, a few curls framing her face, and her green eyes flicked to the clock above the altar, Firefighter 2 p.m. Jake was late. Her heart tightened, a familiar pang of worry, but she forced a smile, remembering his promise. Jake Malone always kept his promises. 5 miles away at Fire Station 7, Jake stood in the locker room, his white dress shirt crisp, his tie half-knotted, dangling like an afterthought. At 32, he was broad-shouldered, with a quiet strength earned through years of battling blazes. A faded scar ran across his left forearm, a memento from a fire 3 years back that had nearly cost him everything. His hazel eyes sparkled with a mix of nerves and excitement as he grinned at his crew. "No fires today, fellas," he said, adjusting his cuffs. "I'm trading my helmet for a ring." Mike Callahan, the station captain, a grizzled man in his late 40s with a beard like steel wool and eyes that had seen too many flames, clapped Jake on the shoulder. "You better not jinx it, Malone. Fires have a way of finding you." Lila Torres, the team's only woman firefighter, lean and tough, smirked from the corner where she polished her helmet. "Sarah's gonna have you on a leash by sundown, Jake." Tommy Evans, the rookie, barely 22, with a mop of blonde hair and a nervous laugh, looked up from lacing his boots. "You really getting married, Jake? That's big." The room chuckled, the easy camaraderie of a firehouse family wrapping around them like a warm blanket. Then it came, the piercing wail of the station's alarm, slicing through the laughter like a blade. Jake froze, his hand on his tie. The dispatcher's voice crackled over the speaker, urgent and clipped. "All units, structure fire at the old textile factory on River Road. Multiple reports of trapped personnel. Immediate response required." The room snapped into motion, a well-oiled machine. Jake's stomach dropped, a cold weight settling in his chest. He grabbed his phone, seeing Sarah's name flash on the screen, but there was no time to answer. He yanked his turnout gear from the locker: jacket, pants, boots, helmet, the weight of it as familiar as his own skin. Mike caught his eye, his voice gruff but kind. "You sitting this one out, groom? No one would blame you." Jake shook his head, his jaw tight. "Not today, Mike. Not when someone's trapped." He pulled on his helmet, the one with his father's old badge number 47, etched inside, a silent reminder of the legacy he carried. With a final glance at his wedding shirt now hanging forlornly in the locker, he ran for the truck. In the cab of Engine 7, Jake sat beside Mike, the sirens screaming, as they tore through Rockford streets. The town blurred past the diner on Main Street, where Sarah loved the cherry pie, the hardware store, with its faded American flag, the town square where kids played under the oaks. His phone buzzed again, Sarah's name lighting up the screen. He answered, his voice steady despite the chaos. "Jake, you promised you'd be here," Sarah said, her voice soft but trembling like a leaf caught in the wind. Jake gripped the phone, his knuckles white against the black plastic. "I will, Sarah. I swear I'll make it. But there's someone in there who needs me right now." A pause stretched between them, heavy with unspoken fears. Then Sarah's voice came steady and sure. "I know, Jake. Just come back to me. Please?" He hung up his chest tight and whispered to himself, "I'm coming home, Sarah." 5 years ago, at a 4th of July fundraiser in Rockford's town park, Jake had met Sarah. The air smelled of grilled hot dogs and sparklers, and the local band played Sweet Home Alabama under a canopy of stars. Jake was fresh off a call, still in his turnout gear, the faint scent of smoke clinging to him. He stood by a picnic table telling a group of wide-eyed kids how he'd climbed through a second-story window to pull a toddler from a burning apartment. Sarah, a third-grade teacher with kind eyes and a long auburn braid, listened from the edge of the crowd holding 2 plastic cups of lemonade. When the kids ran off, she approached, offering him a cup. "You're braver than you let on, Jake Malone," she said, her smile warm like sunlight breaking through clouds. He blushed, scratching the back of his neck. "Just doing my job, ma'am." She laughed, a sound that lodged in his heart like a melody he couldn't shake. Their love grew in the quiet corners of Rockford's small-town life. They shared picnics by the Rock River, where Sarah read poetry aloud while Jake pretended to understand it. They spent evenings on her porch swing, talking about dreams, hers to open a community library, his to honor his father's legacy at the firehouse. But it wasn't always easy. Sarah lived with the constant hum of fear, her kitchen scanner crackling with every call Jake answered. 2 years ago, he'd missed their anniversary dinner, stuck at a warehouse blaze that raged into the night. She waited at the restaurant, her blue dress wrinkled, her eyes red, when he finally arrived, soot-streaked and exhausted. "Will I always come second, Jake?" she asked, her voice breaking like glass. He took her hands, his own rough, from years of gripping hoses. "You're my home, Sarah. The fire's just what I do to keep it safe." She nodded, but the worry never fully left her eyes. Jake's father, Patrick Malone, a retired firefighter, had prepared him for this life. They'd sit in the old man's living room, the fireplace crackling, Patrick's badge gleaming on the mantel. "A firefighter's heart is torn in two. Son," he'd say, his voice gravelly from years of smoke. "Duty to the world, love for your own. You gotta hold both tight or you'll lose one." Jake took those words to heart, carrying them like a compass. Last year, he'd proposed to Sarah outside the firehouse beside his dad's old engine, a red beast, retired but still gleaming. He'd hidden the ring in his helmet, kneeling in the gravel. "Sarah Bennett, you're my reason to come home," he said, his voice thick. She laughed through tears, tackling him in a hug. "Only you would propose with a fire helmet, Jake Malone." Now in the cab of Engine 7, Jake clutched that same helmet, the etched number 47, grounding him as the truck roared toward the factory. The memory of the proposal steadied his racing pulse. He glanced at Mike, who was barking coordinates into the radio. "We're almost there, Malone. You sure about this?" Jake nodded, his jaw set. "I made a promise to Sarah, but I made one to this town too. I'm not breaking either." Mike gave a curt nod, respect in his eyes. "That's why you're one of us, kid." The textile factory loomed ahead, a crumbling relic from Rockford's industrial past. Black smoke billowed from its broken windows, flames licking the brick like hungry tongues. The heat hit them before they even stepped off the truck, a wall of fury that made Tommy flinch. Mike took charge, his voice cutting through the chaos. Lila, Tommy, take the west side, vent the roof. Jake, you're with me. We got a worker trapped on the third floor near the old loom room. Jake nodded, his pulse hammering. He checked his watch, 5:15 p.m. The wedding was supposed to start in 15 minutes. He pushed the thought aside, pulling his mask down and grabbing his axe. Inside the factory was a nightmare of heat and shadow. The air was thick, choking the smoke, swirling like a living thing. Beams groaned overhead and sparks rained down, stinging Jake's exposed neck. His boots crunched on shattered glass as he followed Mike up a rickety staircase, the wood creaking under their weight. The radio crackled, Mike's voice sharp. Jake, you're cutting it close for that altar. Jake growled back, I'm not leaving him, Mike, and I'm not leaving her. His father's words echoed in his mind, duty and love. Hold both tight. They reached the third floor where the fire was fiercest. Flames danced across the walls, consuming stacks of old fabric. Through the haze, Jake heard a faint cry. Help over here! He pushed forward his flashlight, cutting through the smoke. There, slumped against a rusted loom, was a man in his 50s, his face pale, his coughs ragged. Jake knelt, checking for injuries. Hang on, sir. We're getting you out. The man grabbed his arm, his grip weak. Thought I was done for, he rasped. Jake hoisted him over his shoulder, the weight heavy but bearable. Mike cleared a path, shouting, Move, Malone! This place is coming down! The staircase buckled as they descended, a beam crashing behind them. Jake's hand burned where an ember had seared through his glove, but he gritted his teeth, focusing on Sarah's face, her green eyes, her smile, her belief in him. The radio buzzed with Lila's voice. Roof's vented, but it's bad up here. Get out now. Jake pushed forward, his legs burning, his lungs screaming. They burst out into the cool evening air, paramedics rushing to take the worker. Jake collapsed to one knee, gasping, his shirt torn, his face streaked with soot, his hand throbbing with a fresh burn. He checked his watch, 5:27 p.m. I'm late, he muttered, panic rising. He stood, ignoring the pain, and sprinted for the truck. Mike grabbed his arm, a rare grin breaking through his beard. We'll get you there, kid. Trust us. Back at St. Mary's, the church was a cauldron of whispers and worry. Sarah stood at the altar, her mother, Ellen Bennett, beside her. Ellen, a firefighter's wife for 3 decades, wore a navy dress and a quiet strength, her graying hair pinned neatly. She squeezed Sarah's hand, her voice steady. He'll come, sweetheart. Firefighters always find a way. Pastor John, a wiry man in his 60s with a warm smile and a knack for lightening the mood, addressed the crowd from the pulpit. Folks, Jake's probably saving the world before he says, I do. Let's give him a minute. The guests chuckled, but the tension was palpable, like a storm brewing. Sarah's eyes flicked to the clock, 5:30 p.m. Her bouquet felt heavier, the wildflowers wilting slightly in her grip. She glanced at her mother, who nodded reassuringly. Ellen had lived this life, waiting through long nights, listening to the scanner, praying for her husband's safe return. Sarah had grown up with that same scanner in their kitchen, its static a constant companion. She remembered her father's stories, his pride in the firehouse, his badge now resting in a shadow box at home. Your Jake's cut from the same cloth, Ellen had told her. He'll always come back. But the crowd was growing restless. Mr. Harold Thompson, a local businessman in a crisp gray suit, leaned toward Ellen, his voice low but audible. Ellen, this is getting ridiculous. We can't wait all day for him. Sarah overheard her eyes flashing with defiance. She stepped forward, her voice clear, cutting through the murmurs. Jake will be here, Mr. Thompson. I trust him. The room fell silent, her words carrying a strength that stilled even the skeptics. Ellen smiled, her eyes misty. That's my girl, she whispered. Sarah's mind drifted to a memory Jake sitting on her couch after a brutal shift, his head in his hands. It was the night of the warehouse fire, the one that had kept him from their anniversary. He'd come to her apartment at midnight still in his gear, his face smudged with soot. If I'm ever late, Sarah, he'd said, his voice heavy, it's because someone needed me more. But I'll always choose you. She'd taken his hand, feeling the calluses, the weight of his world. I know, Jake, she'd said. I know who you are. Now she clutched her bouquet tighter, her ears straining for any sound beyond the church's walls. A guest in the back row had a scanner app open on his phone, the dispatcher's voice faint but clear. Fire at River Road contained. All personnel accounted for. Sarah's heart leapt, but there was no word on Jake. She closed her eyes, whispering, Please be safe, Jake. Come back to me. The clock ticked to 5:35 p.m. The murmurs grew louder, a tide of doubt rising. Mr. Thompson stood addressing Pastor John directly. Pastor, let's be practical. He's not coming. We should postpone this. A few guests nodded, their faces tight with impatience. Sarah's chest tightened, but she stepped forward again, her voice steady, unwavering. Jake will be here. I know him. Her words hung in the air, a quiet command. Pastor John nodded, his eyes twinkling. Faith moves mountains, folks. Let's trust Sarah on this one. Ellen squeezed her hand again, whispering, Your father would be so proud of you. Then it came a sound that sliced through the tension like a blade, sharp and unmistakable. Sirens. Not one, but many, growing louder, closer. The church doors swung open and every head turned, eyes wide. Outside, 4 fire trucks rolled into view, their red and blue lights painting the dusk, their sirens a triumphant chorus. The crowd gasped, a collective intake of breath. Jake stepped down from the lead truck, his dress shirt torn, his face streaked with ash, his left hand bandaged from the burn. But his eyes were bright, his smile radiant, a beacon in the fading light. Behind him, Mike, Lila, and Tommy formed a line, each raising their helmet in a salute of Firehouse honor guard. The church erupted in cheers, guests leaping to their feet, clapping, some wiping tears. Jake ran to Sarah, dropping to one knee before her, his breath ragged. I'm here, Sarah, he said, his voice cracking from smoke and emotion. I kept my promise. Sarah knelt too, her hands framing his soot-streaked face, tears streaming down her cheeks. You're my hero, Jake Malone, she whispered, her voice thick with love. They stood embracing, the crowd's cheers washing over them like a wave. Pastor John laughed, his voice booming over the noise. Never seen a groom arrive with a fire truck parade. Let's get these two married. Mike stepped forward, holding a fire helmet engraved with Jake and Sarah in elegant script. From the Firehouse family, he said, his gruff voice softening. We couldn't let our boy get hitched without a proper send-off. Lila winked at Sarah, her tough exterior cracking into a grin. Told you he'd make it, Sarah. Tommy, eyes wide with awe, just nodded, clutching his helmet like a lifeline. Even Mr. Thompson stood clapping, slowly, his face flushed. I was wrong, Jake, he said, his voice low. You're the real deal. The ceremony was simple, heartfelt, a moment carved from the chaos of the day. Jake and Sarah stood before Pastor John. Their hands clasped the crowd, a sea of smiles and misty eyes. Jake's vows were quiet but firm, each word weighted with truth. Sarah, you're my home, my heart, my reason to come back. I'll run through fire for you always. Sarah's voice trembled, but her eyes never left his. Jake, you save lives every day, but you saved me first. I'm yours forever. The rings slid on simple gold bands that gleamed in the candlelight, and their kiss drew cheers that shook the rafters. As the sun set, Jake and Sarah stepped outside, climbing onto the lead fire truck. The townsfolk lined the streets, some waving American flags, others saluting their faces glowing with pride. The sirens gave a final whoop, a joyful note, and the church bell rang its deep tones, blending with the fading light. Ellen hugged them both, her voice thick. Your dad would be proud, Jake. So proud. Mr. Thompson, now humbled, shook Jake's hand, his grip firm. You taught us something today, son. This town's lucky to have you. The fire trucks rolled away, carrying Jake and Sarah toward the reception at the town hall, where tables were laden with potluck dishes, casseroles, pies, and the firehouse's famous chili. The crowd followed a procession of laughter and stories, the kind of night that binds a town together. Mike raised a glass at the reception, his toast simple. To Jake and Sarah, proof that love can outrun fire. Lila added, and to the firehouse family who always have your back. Tommy, still starstruck, just said, to heroes. The room cheered, glasses, clinking, hearts full. This is the story of a firefighter and his bride, of a summer day in Rockford, of a promise kept through flames and faith. It's a reminder that in the heart of America's heartland, where sirens sing and church bells chime, the greatest way to honor love is through the courage to keep your word. So take a moment today, think of Jake, of Sarah, of the heroes who run toward danger for us all. Share this story not just to remember them, but to remind us that duty and love together are the truest form of honor. And if you're ever in a small town like Rockford, listen for the sirens. You might just hear the heartbeat of a nation beating strong through the fire.